Support for this show comes from Lead Quizzes. Lead Quizzes helps you easily set up high-converting quizzes to capture and qualify leads for your business. Visit leadquizzes.com/podcast to get a 14-day free trial today.
We had problems scaling up our infrastructure and architecture, and at the same time we were starting to see that we had some retention problems, retaining our customers. That journey of going from that 20 people to 70 people and from 2,000 customers to 20,000 customers, the requirements on the team and on the organization and the leadership team, they change so many times that it is quite an intense experience.
From Lead Quizzes, it's Journey to Seven Figures, a show about entrepreneurs and the stories behind how they grew their business to seven figures and beyond. We cover the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the lessons they learned along the way. All right, so welcome back to Journey to Seven Figures. Today, I'm interviewing David Darmanin, founder and CEO at Hotjar. Hotjar is a user research and analytics software. It's an all-in-one tool supporting features like heat maps, visitor session playback, conversion funnels, and more. Hotjar allows your team to uncover insights about your website visitors and make the right changes. Now, in just 4 years, they've grown to $16.5 million annual recurring revenue and 21,000 paying customers. David, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Awesome. All right. Well, David, let's take it back to the origin stories of how you guys started with Hotjar.
Yeah, that's quite the story there. So we've written a little bit about the story, but there's a few details that always come to mind, which are interesting to share, right? That we sometimes forget. So I've always been a designer at heart, and I love product. I love marketing. And before Hotjar, I worked in-house in a software company where I was leading the design and marketing side of things. And I was using a bunch of tools. This was the very beginning of what was then called conversion rate optimization, or today people call it growth marketing. So it's using a bunch of tools, attending a bunch of events to help grow the business. And I learned a lot and made a ton of mistakes. But most tools back then were just so difficult to get access to because of their cost more than anything. Mm-hmm. And also they were quite kind of fractured, right? There was a lot of tools that you needed. Mm-hmm. Anyway, fast forward from there, I went to work with conversion rate experts. Amazing experience. I worked with a ton of different companies, growing them. And it was interesting to see that my frustration with the tools that we were using were shared by all of these amazing brands that I was working with. So it was at this time that I reached out to my now co-founders who I had worked with already before. And I said, hey, we're all kind of tinkering with small projects on the side. What if we thought bigger? What if we created a tool that kind of we would have used a few years back, right? This was the tool that we wanted back then when we worked together. And it feels like in general, the industry, the market needs it. And yeah, we decided to build it. And the way I describe it is that we basically scratched our own itch, right? And I think it's a good way of putting it because I speak to a lot of early stage founders, and it's very easy to sometimes be a little bit smart, thinking about, I know this, and I think this could be a great opportunity to build a product. But I like to ask always, does an itch really exist, right? Mm-hmm. Do people actually need this? Is there real value being delivered here? So the way we describe it is we pretty much allow teams to understand how their site is being used. And that knowledge empowers them to make the right changes, to grow, to improve the experience. So that's pretty much it.
Awesome. So you saw the need in the market was really a need for these tools, but a lot of the pricing was too prohibitive for a lot of companies to be able to have access to it, and also a fragmentation where you need to use a bunch of these. Was that correct?
Exactly. And on the back of that, that's where we launched the infamous Hotjar beta. And so we wanted to learn very quickly whether this kind of was a good idea or not. So we put together a site which described the product. It said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to launch a beta soon. If you want in, join the list, kind of a waiting list. This was 4 years ago, right? So since then, this has become a little bit more common. But not many people were taking this approach of you basically power a beta by actually joining the waiting list. And then you could move up in the list by referring your friends, and we incentivized it. And within a few months, we had 60,000 people on this list. That actually was kind of the wave that from then led to all the growth we saw later on, creating that huge community of people that were using it, helping it, and spreading the word.
Awesome. So let's break that down a little bit. So you throw up a landing page, and I believe you have an email opt-in to join the waiting list, and then you describe some of the features that you're going to do on there. So you have things like heat maps, so you can see how people are like, how much they're scrolling or maybe where they're clicking. You guys have stuff like visitor session playback, where you actually record their mouse on the screen and see like, are they getting stuck in different places? And so what's the thing that is really driving like so much interest in like 60,000 people signing up for it? Is it this all in one thing? Is it the price? What do you think is driving that?
I think it's a combo, right? And the reality is that if you want to displace existing players and existing solutions, there is a certain threshold of improvement you need to reach in order to get attention.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I see this very common in new startups, that what they're building is a tiny improvement on what already exists. So it's not worth making a change. And let's face it, we know as humans, we don't like to change. So we really need to make that worth it. So I think that the combo was mainly that we shifted the way the product worked for it to be like more report based on demand instead of just collect everything, which made the Hotjar much more affordable, and you're much more in control of the cost.
Which, David, means you're not recording everything on the site. You're just recording a specific page or what you really care about.
Yeah, we give a lot of flexibility around this. So an agency can pinpoint specific pages and pain points they want to work on, but then an in-house team can say, okay, we want to record everything everywhere.
Okay.
So it's having that flexibility. And obviously you pay depending on what level of data you're going for, right?
Okay.
So that was a big one, especially for agencies. This is a big win when you have a lot of clients and you're obviously the cost is more important to you. Then the second piece is the one script aspect, right? You don't need 3-4 scripts and solutions. It's one script, one interface where you can do a lot of you have most of the stuff that you need as a data-driven team to find opportunities for improvement. And then also the simplification, right? So we really just simplified things, made it just really, really easy to use. So I'd say it's a combination of those things together.
Okay, awesome. So when you guys launched this, I didn't mention all of the features you guys promoted on the landing page, but you guys do heat maps like feedback, exit polls, online surveys, form abandonment analysis, conversion funnel analysis, visitor session playback, recruit user testers, and visitor chat. I looked up Wayback Time Machine and I checked your landing page, and I believe all of those features were listed. So that's a lot of features, and that could be a lot of development. So did you guys launch with everything, or how did that work?
No. So we didn't do, chat was an idea that we had in the beginning. That was kind of the first time I think the team said, David, forget it. It's impossible. We're going to do all of this, right? So the reality is that the way I like to break it down rather than the whole list of tools is our thinking with Hotjar was the main difference of how we were approaching the whole concept of analyzing and understanding and doing research around the user and the experience is that we combine two main areas together, which is the behavioral, or you might call typically the analytics piece of what are people doing in terms of on the site, and then what are they doing within the page, right? So that's funnels, heat maps, recordings, and whatnot. But the purpose of developing these features is for you to understand what's happening, right? How are they moving around and what are they doing on the page? And then the second area, so we're connecting that behavioral analytics to feedback. So at given points where you're trying to figure out why they're doing something in the site or on the page, what are they saying when you ask them that question, right? So was this a good experience or not? Why did you not do this, or why did you do it? So it's connecting these two things really at the hip within the same interface with one script. And that's really powerful, right? Because that's on the basic level, that's what most teams were missing before Hotjar came along. That quick ability to understand, okay, what are people doing? Why are they doing it? What's missing? And where are they getting stuck? Hotjar gave the ability to answer a lot of these questions very, very, very easily, very quickly.
Okay, so you guys combine qualitative and quantitative data.
That's it.
In this tool. You guys offered it at a great price. So with this waitlist, I'm curious. So you list all these features. Is that something you guys communicate of here's our entire product vision, or how do you communicate that where it's you're not going to get everything all at once? How did that kind of match up with expectations?
Yeah, we knew that we couldn't deliver on all of this, right? It's the whole concept of pretty much you build it as you sell it, right? That's what we were trying to do. In our case, we actually sold it before we built it in a way. But then on an ongoing basis, what we did was at a certain point, we decided, okay, we have to stop this beta. So we reached the point where we felt we had reached, the MVP was fulfilled and we had a proof of concept that was working. And we said, okay, it's time to now start monetizing this, because obviously we were running out of the money we put in ourselves into the business.
Mhm.
And we said, let's monetize it so that we can reinvest everything we make back into the product, right? Build a team, etc. So what we did was we created a public roadmap where we listed what we're going to work on, what's coming next, so everyone could get an idea of what's being worked on and understand what they were paying for, what it was going towards. And that was incredibly effective. Since then, and actually another thing that we did at that time was that any conversation we had on tickets or support or chat, we'd also put down their ideas into a Trello board and link it back to them so that we could also factor that in, and that affected the roadmap. And now since then, we've integrated a tool into the interface where people can actually vote for or suggest stuff that they'd like to see, and they can still see the roadmap as we work on it.
Okay. And I asked because communication is going to be a theme that we maybe dig into here a little bit more with your customers. Do you guys do like a long, like, here's our roadmap for the next year? Or do you guys kind of keep it like, here's our roadmap for the next thing that we're working on?
Yeah, to us, roadmap is more, here are the priorities, right, that we're thinking about. Mm-hmm. We try to be as lean as possible, and there's a lot of challenges as you scale. Mm-hmm. So we try and avoid setting specific dates simply because we know we can't stick to them, right? So, mm-hmm. And sometimes we have surprises, but in more cases than not, something crops out of nowhere and we have to do it, and we communicate that, but means other things are shifted back. But as you said, it's all about communication in the end, right? Mm-hmm. One of our values is building trust with transparency, and it's something that we really believe in. It's just saying it how it is, right? This is the situation, this is what we're doing, this is how we're building, this is our challenges we have, why we decided not to do something, why we decided to do it. I think if you communicate very openly with your users and fans and your customers, it's incredibly effective because you're bringing them on board with you on the journey, right? So they understand what's going on.
Sure. All right, so let's jump back to the pre-launch phase. So you guys get this landing page up. You guys put some incentives in place, like, or do you want to maybe explain a couple of the incentives, like how they get a lifetime account or a free t-shirt, some of these things for referring other people?
Sure. So actually, this is something worth sharing here. We worked on a startup before Hotjar, which never took off, which was kind of a loyalty program / marketing automation thing. Mm-hmm. And we learned a lot from it around what incentives actually work. So we were lucky to kind of be able to use that learning to put it into the beta launch. So if any of you are thinking of doing a referral program, which I highly recommend, first off, it's really important that it's simple. So in our case, it was just purely put in your email, verify, you're showing your position on the list, and then on that same page, you're given options of what you can do to move up the list. However, what we learned about incentivizing is that there are typically two types of people, right? There are people that are competitive. They like to compete for the first place or top positions. And then there are people who are not competitive and prefer kind of a fixed reward, right? So you do something and you get a reward, and it's not dependent on the competition. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to kind of incentivize both these groups of people. So big rewards for the very competitive people, and then fixed rewards for people that just wanted, like, again, a fixed thing to do. So what we did was we decided, I think it was top 20 on the list. I think it was top 20 got a lifetime account. So the way we figured out, like we said, in most cases, it's rare to see people give a lifetime account. And we saw, when you think about it, it really costs us nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So we thought, however, for some people, this can be a big thing. Mm-hmm. And it was a good choice because we saw some really fierce competition for these lifetime accounts. Mm. So yeah, that was incredibly effective. Then on the back of that, we also had, I believe, t-shirts for the top 200. So again, some competition there. And then I believe we had a fixed, the way we did it was, we said, if you referred 5 friends, you get 6 months for free of Hotjar or something of the sort. And then if you refer, for example, you reach another threshold, then you, for example, get, again, some more merchandise. And this was incredibly effective, especially since, and we didn't see this coming, 6 months in, as we were already making money, we saw another big boost as people who were using it for 6 months actually started paying as well. So if you're going to do like some kind of referral program and you want to kind of gamify it, definitely keep both kind of character types in mind.
Okay, so those are the prizes. And then as far as people signing up for the waitlist or to use it, you guys offer the software for free until the point of when you guys took it out of beta. Is that correct?
Correct. That's it.
Okay.
And again, going back to the communication piece, if anyone's considering doing this, really, really important to communicate really often throughout the process about that deadline, right? About when that is going to end. So there's no surprises.
Okay. And then one more thing, did you guys build this yourselves or was it pre-made software that you used to help drive this?
We had to look around. Back then, there weren't that many choices, so we built it ourselves. It was quite simple, to be honest. So again, keep it super simple if you're going to build it yourself. But I know that there are a few options out there nowadays.
Okay, awesome. So we got this set up. And then now as far as driving traffic, how did you get traffic and get people to find out about this outside of the referral program?
So when you're doing a beta program and you have a very short time span, the last thing you want to do is content, right? Because content is where you want to obviously need to put a lot of work into it, and then you see amazing organic returns, but it's a long play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we needed to validate this quickly, and we needed to spread the word quickly because we needed to get feedback quickly, right? Like the beta, we needed to have a lot of people using it. So we opted for paid, so pretty much direct marketing. And this is something that we knew very well, so we definitely had an advantage here because I had done it it was part of what I used to consult a lot of startups and businesses in. And we also saw it as a great opportunity to identify how we should, like by testing different ads, we used Facebook in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
By testing different ways of describing the tool, it helped us to very quickly also refine what the positioning should be, right? How do we describe Hotjar to someone? How do we position it? So we spent the first month testing a bunch of different ways of describing it. And we finally got to an ad that worked extremely well. And what was great is by spending some money on that, we then also, besides paid like advertising on social, we then also used that refined text and images and what we knew worked so well. And we went and did some email marketing. And this might be a surprise to some people, right? Like most people today don't think of email because it's kind of not that sexy, but it is incredibly effective, especially if you are launching something new. So our approach was quite simply, we already knew that there was good word of mouth at the stage very early on. People were talking about the product and saying, oh my God, this is amazing. So we knew there was this potential. So what we did was we approached sites where you typically find, like we were targeting marketers and designers, right? So we approach sites where you typically find designers and marketers using these sites, right? So communities, forums, publishers, and we said, hey, do you send out emails? And they'll be like, yeah. And we're like, we'd like to sponsor an email, right? So you just send out an email saying, this is a sponsored email where we'd like to introduce you to Hotjar, which we think is an awesome new tool. And we typically gave them also a free account so they could actually test the tool and feel actually comfortable recommending us, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And this approach worked extremely well because especially when you're launching something new, using email to send out the words is incredibly effective. We know how inbox is, right? Like it's already incredibly noisy. So just finding like a new launch or something interesting being released, that's something you're more likely to engage with, especially if it's coming from a trusted source,
Mm-hmm.
like a site or forum or whatever that you use. So that was incredibly effective for us. But if we hadn't done the paid, maybe the way we would have described it and everything, the results would have been very different for us, right? So we failed small and we failed quickly with paid ads and then took those learnings and applied them to bigger bets where you might be spending 2,000 or 3,000 euros on an email, right? Which is very scary at that stage.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm interested a little bit in the price. So you haven't really mentioned price up to this point of what you guys have spent on ads or too much on like emails. So is this all money that you guys have self-invested this far? And like how much did you kind of put into like, testing out paid traffic and that kind of thing? Because you're driving people to basically a free account where you're not getting paid revenue yet, right?
Yeah, agreed. So at this point, we're making no money at all. So when we were launching, we realized there were two things that we had to do. One, we had to spend money to move fast because there was an opportunity. And there's something to be said about, like, you want to be lean and iterative and learn, but you do want to create a little bit of a noise at the same time, if you know what I mean. Like stretching the same spend over too long a period of time means that it doesn't amplify as much as when you do it a little bit more concentrated. So I guess in our case, doing concentrated spend on the beta was very effective to us, especially since there was no friction. right? So we were getting a lot of people to sign up for something that was free, test it and give us feedback. But again, creating that word of mouth. So we knew we had to do that. So there was a spend involved to pull that off. And the second one was we also knew that we had to pay the team. We had tried, team being the co-founders, right? We were an amazing co-founding team, but we couldn't expect people to quit their jobs and just not make money, right? So, and the alternative to that, and we had done that before, was to work part-time or kind of do it after work. And that never worked because things were moving way too slowly. So we knew we had to do both. So what we did was two things. One, out of the 5 co-founders, 2 of us put cash into the business in 2 forms. One, actual cash. So we put some of our savings into the business, which would pay for salaries to cover the beta period. And second, for the first 6 months of Hotjar, I continued to work as a consultant. And instead of taking that money home, I put that money into the business. So I went 6 months without a salary, which I'm very lucky to kind of be able to. I was able to do that because I had saved up when I was working as a consultant. My wife was not too impressed, though, with this idea.
Yeah. It's a better story looking back than when you're actually...
Yeah, now it's okay. Yeah, now it's okay. But the reality is, and this is, again, another big learning for me, right? Which is I had tinkered a lot with tiny startups and everything. And I'm not taking anything away from starting small and growing in that way. That's a great way to do it. But we need to keep one thing in mind, right? Which is we don't have a limited amount of time, right? Mm-hmm. And when I started this, I was... Okay, so I'm going to be 38 in February. So I was 34, 33. So kind of you start to feel like, you know what I mean? That there isn't that much time. Like I don't want to spend 3-4 years building up something slowly on the side. And then if it doesn't work, what do I do? Start that all over again? Mm-hmm. And I had already done this a couple of times and it just felt like time was running out. So again, something worth considering. If you really believe in an idea and if you feel like there's an opportunity, because timing is important, it's really important that you drop everything to do that, right? Which is very different than if you don't know what to do and you want to and you want to explore. Then the approach of going slow and tinkering around makes a lot of sense.
Okay. All right. So David, when you guys launched this, the goal is when you guys come out of beta, you guys pick $29 a month. So out of curiosity, like how did you guys understand what you were willing to acquire, you know, a free or a beta user for? How much were you guys willing to spend for that? And how did you guys figure that number out?
Well, that's a good one. So we're talking about how much we're willing to pay for a beta user in relation to the 29, right?
Yeah. So prior to like you're driving, you know, these 60,000 signups, but none of them are paying you off the bat. So how do you know how much you pay for them?
That's a great question, man. That's the first time anyone has ever asked me that question. And I remember clearly myself and my co-founder in a lobby at some point, we were having a drink and thinking, how much are we willing to continue spending and what are we likely to make out of it? So the reality is the answer to this is assumptions, right? Mm-hmm. But a big advantage that we had is that we had already worked together in a business where we, take a wild guess, we were selling software for $29. And we were doing this, though, it was B2C, not B2B. So our logic was we made some assumptions around listen, if we got so many beta users, let's take a rough assumption of how many of them we expect to actually become customers, right? So we had our own experience and knowledge, and I had worked again with other startups and companies. I had a rough idea, but it's very easy to find data around like average freemium to paid conversion rate. So we used that. We took a rough idea around that, and then we basically calculated what would be the cost of acquiring directly a user so a beta user. And then we also factored in like what we call the blended approach, right? Which is looking at how many people are actually coming in organically. And you have to sometimes take the bold approach of saying you attribute those to the paid as well, right? So that's what makes the paid worth it. So let's do some simple math, right? Mm-hmm. So we actually found out that we were acquiring beta users at roughly $3 to $4 each, which was for then, more for now. That was actually a very good price. Mm-hmm. Why? Because roughly for every one user that we got paid, we were getting, I think, another 2 organically, right? Word of mouth. So that already impacts the cost quite considerably. it drops it quite a lot. And then if you look at freemium conversion rate on the low end, let's say 2 to 5%, again, if you calculate that and you look at the pricing we were doing, we had 29 and 89. We assumed 20% would be on 89. If you run the math, we knew that it was going to be worth it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good feedback. We'll get back to the show in a minute, but first a quick thanks to our sponsor, Lead Quizzes. If you want to grow your business to 7 figures and beyond, you must learn how to generate leads predictably. When I first started my business, lead generation felt like riding a roller coaster. I would have huge sales months and then months with nothing. This happened because I relied solely on referrals and networking to grow my business. Predicting growth and investing in the future were frightening because I didn't have control over my lead generation. That was before we created Lead Quizzes. Now I predictably generate leads in my sleep and have stopped worrying about where the next sale will come from. Top marketers like Neil Patel and Lewis House have used Lead Quizzes to increase their lead capture by up to 500%. Think about it. Quizzes are fun, engaging, and you can offer personalized feedback in exchange for your quiz taker's contact information. Lead Quizzes is a software that allows you to set up high-converting quizzes quickly without having to hire an expensive programmer. In fact, our users have generated over 3 million leads for their businesses. Take control of your lead generation today and start your 14-day free trial by going to leadquizzes.com/podcast. Okay, so you guys go through this launch period. I believe this period, how long was it? Was it about 6 months or 4 months that you guys were in beta?
I think so. We launched the company in June 2014.
Mm-hmm.
We spent a couple of months just making sure technically what we were promising was actually feasible and we weren't insane. So nothing was public yet. And then I believe we put the site live June, July. Exactly. It was end of August, roughly or mid-August, we put the site live and things started to really ramp up around September. Then we started to bring in people in around October, and then we stopped it in May. So that would be August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. So 8 months.
Okay. So you guys get to $1 million annual recurring revenue really quickly, like within a year, right, David?
So I believe we got to $1 million in ARR 6 months after May. So once we exited the beta, within 6 months, we had hit 1 million ARR. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think that frames up kind of how quickly you guys grew. I'd love to jump in a little bit more as far as you drive 60,000 emails in, and I believe 7,000 became active beta users afterwards. Is that right?
No, I think it was more. I think you're right, actually. I think
you guys got 60,000 emails, 18,000 became beta users, and then 7,000 of those became active.
That is correct.
Okay. So let's talk about that period. So you guys get a lot of people in. Let's talk a little bit about if you had to do much to actually get people to then to like start using the product and how you started collecting feedback and improving it till you could get it out of beta.
So this is during the beta phase, right? That's what you mean, that question.
Yep.
Yeah, the reality is, and this was quite surprising to us, that we actually didn't make that much effort. So I honestly, having done other startups before, when we started to invite users, we had to really put effort into onboarding and seeing how they're going to kind of use the tool. And I think that's kind of, again, another indicator of whether you've got something that is going to scale or not, in the sense that early on, you don't need to spend so much time optimizing, onboarding, and whatnot. That's a good sign, right? That people manage to use the tool and get value out of it without too much optimization being done. So during the beta time, we didn't need to put so much effort into it because there were so many people that wanted this functionality and were getting value out of it that they were using it even if it was broken, and they were very patient with us. So we didn't need to make so much effort around that, but there were two key things that we did, right? So first off, at that time we used Intercom. Since then we've moved from Intercom because it didn't scale that well. But we used Intercom back then, which was very effective for a beta, right? So having some kind of chat or instant like communication functionality when you're at the beta stage, at an early stage, is critical. You don't want people sending you fucking tickets when something is broken and it's very early on, right? You want to be able to back and forth, oh shit, like, yeah, we fixed it, try again, right? You want to make it as conversational as possible that you can manage that. So that was one. And then two, very, very important, I was pretty much full-time doing email and in-app announcements to two groups of people. people in the beta that were actually using the tool. So saying, okay, this week we did this, next week we're going to do that, this week we did this, just repeating that, right? And then also communicating to the people that were still on the waiting list, waiting to come in. Because another problem we had was the more people we were inviting, the more data we were getting. And it was starting to become more and more challenging just to manage that data aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were very careful to not bring people in. Also, we wanted to bring people in groups because let's say we bring in 500 people, then we get some input, make some changes. We'd get input from that existing 500 that were using it, but then it's interesting to invite 500 new and to see how they react to those changes, right? So by batching it in that way, that was very effective. But I emailed those people also every 2 weeks roughly, explaining what was going on, why they're waiting, and why we were doing a waiting list. So just re-explaining the value of what's going on, just keeping everyone engaged.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So it seemed like you guys communicated on a weekly basis with people, continuing to give them updates, what's going on. You guys are making feedback on changes. And so you guys just do that through the point of like, you guys feel like the product is solid, you got everybody on, and then you start to make the switch over to paid users?
Yes, the scariest time ever.
Okay, so walk me through that time, because that's a scary point, I think, for anybody. And as a side note, one of the reasons I bring on software companies is because I think it applies to if you sell information products, e-commerce products. But I think the concepts that software companies require is just magnifying it at scale. So, you have 60,000 people, you're bringing on 500 at a time, you're just getting so much feedback. So that's why I bring on software companies onto this podcast. So yeah, let's talk about this. So you're basically getting feedback, you put people on for free. So let's talk about that transition from free to paid and what that was like for you.
Yeah, so the reality is we made it very clear when we published the beta and had it on the site, we made it very clear that it had a price to it, right? And this is really important. So the last thing you want to do is do a beta which says, here's what we're going to do, it's free, come test it out. That's a bad idea, because then you're going to get the wrong people testing it, right? So we were very clear, here's Hotjar, it's going to cost $29 for this and $89 for this, and if you want, you can test it for free during the beta. So that was really important. Funnily enough, during the time we were running the beta, I remember someone else launched a similar kind of waitlist thing. And what they did was that you actually had to pay in advance of the beta, which is, I don't know, it can be debated. What makes the most sense, right? Like in that case where you pay in advance, but you're not charged. Sorry, you put your card on file, but you're not charged until you decide to continue. But that was kind of smart of them because you've got the intent and it's less scary. But at the same time, it might be introducing a lot of friction as well, right? So depending on how much volume you're going or how niche you are, then it might make sense to go one way or the other. But yeah, for us, it was mainly scary in the sense of, are these people just using it because it's free, or are they really getting value that they're willing to pay for it, right? And this was the point where obviously we were eating our own dog food, and we were doing quite a few surveys as well, right? So sometimes these emails would include a link that would say, we're doing a beta user survey. So we would ask, what is it that you like the most? What is it that you like the least? How would you describe it to a friend? So continue improving our positioning for the ads that we're running and whatnot. And then we would also ask, like, how likely are you to pay for it, right? So that was interesting. And the indicators we were getting from those surveys were positive, but you never know, right? With money, until you see the wallet, like you never know. It's easy to say, yeah, I'll pay for it. So what we did was we decided that let's set a date for the end of the beta, and then also say after that month, just so that we're not asking for the money directly, we were scared to ask money. We set this as the end of the beta and tell everyone after that, the following month, you'll have a free month, right? So at least we're opening up this news with positive news, right? So we were saying come April, like end of March, the beta ends. April is on us, right? But during this time, you need to decide what you're going to do, right? So if you're on the beta, what you were testing in the beta is the equivalent of the €29 plan. So if you want to continue with that, you need to pay. Now, during the beta, we also noticed that we had a lot of people that were using the tool and writing about it, but they didn't have traffic, and they were telling us in the surveys, we're not going to pay for this, but we love it. And we're like, oh my God, this sounds crazy. Like, it feels like we're going to take like 1,000, 2,000 people and just block them completely from the product. And this was actually the point where we decided to have a free plan, to actually do freemium. So we took that 29 plan that we were testing in the beta, and we reduced a little bit the data capture levels and some features we felt were more interesting to businesses. Pretty much stab in the dark, right? And we said, this is the free version. We called it Hotjar Basic. So what we said was, you've got 1 month, which is free with Hotjar, the €29 and or $29. And after that period, you need to decide whether you want to downgrade to basic or continue with that. And that proved to be a very interesting way of doing it, because we had the default we set was that in the beta, you were on the paid version, and then there's that binary choice of downgrade or continue. And that was very effective, because right out of the gate, we had quite a few customers, and at that point, we were pretty much break even month one.
Awesome. So you guys grew pretty quickly from there. You got to $1 million within 6 months of that beta, and then you went from 1 million to 3 million in year two. In my research, you focused a lot on just infrastructure of building the right team and putting systems in place, making sure you guys have metrics to measure those people. We don't have too much time to get into that today, but I think one thing that would be interesting to go over with you, David, is your remote workforce. So you guys have 72 team members currently in 17 different countries. So can you tell me a little bit about maybe why you decided to go that route and how you've been able to make that work? Maybe a couple of challenges that you guys have had to overcome?
There's two sides to it. One, it's because what I love. I have 2 young kids. I love to travel. I've always been a traveler. My wife is actually not Maltese. She's Swedish. So we like to go to Sweden as often as we can. And I love this concept of flexibility and freedom and not being necessarily needing to be in an office. I know it's not for everyone, but reason number one is passion, and I love it. And I think I love living this way. Mm-hmm. The second reason is bare necessity. I was born in Australia, but we moved back to Malta when I was 8. Since then, I've traveled a lot, as I said, but I've pretty much worked most of my professional life here in Malta. And it's really tough hiring people, right? Mm-hmm. So the reality is, I know tons of businesses that are trying to relocate people here, and it's just crazy to see the effort and work, and then it doesn't work out. It's crazy. I was working in a actually Swedish software company here in Malta, where we scaled up to 150 to 100 people. It was so painful hiring people in this way that we said, we don't want to make any compromises, right? We want to hire the best people. And I think the co-founders, we all had that same point of view. And in a way, kind of, we all feel like we're citizens of the world. So in a way, we're like, what if we just decided to ignore all this country nuisance, kind of, and just said, mm-hmm. Let's just hire the best people we can find, right? And it matched very well how we launched as a product. We never thought, let's launch in Malta and then see how it goes, or let's launch in the UK and then see how it goes. We just launched to all designers and marketers. That was our approach. So similarly, if we need to hire engineers, let's just get the best engineers. Now, obviously, we don't do this in a stupid way, right? You don't want a team of engineers where you've got half the team in Australia and the other half in, let's say, New York, because that would be a mess. Mm-hmm. So we put some thought into this, right? So our product and engineering team are all in the European time zone. So from anywhere from Stockholm all the way to Cape Town. But then when it comes to marketing and customer experience, so support and whatnot and ops, they sit close to our customers and their team. So then we have people all the way from California to Tel Aviv, and we're hoping to extend into Asia eventually. So that's the reasons for it, and that's like a very high level of how we kind of put some constraints on it.
Okay. So it sounds like some of the research I've done, you guys are very transparent with your numbers. So you guys do a weekly meeting with the whole team. Like, what is some of the communication you guys do with the employees to keep everyone pulled together while they're so far apart?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the reality is that there is no silver bullet to it, and it actually changes as you grow. Right? So the stuff that we did when we were 20 no longer work today, and now it's a completely different model. And actually the answer is typically much less communication and more how you're organized. So now that, for example, we're 70, we found that there's too much noise of communication going on in the way we're structured. So instead we reorganized just now the company to be more around steps in the customer journey, around missions, and bring people from across different departments, if we call them that, or different areas of specialization. So you bring together someone from support, someone from success, with an engineer and a designer and a product manager, and you give them a challenge so that you start to minimize that cross-departmental communication that can be insane, right? So there is that aspect as well. But yeah, there's a lot written about this. When you're remote, it's critical that you double down on asynchronous communication. So it's not necessarily being in a meeting and talking and then expecting everyone to know what happened. And the reality is this applies even if you're not remote, right? So some good practices here are having that discipline to write down what was discussed and agreed on and communicating it as quickly as possible to the team. And then again, organizing yourself in a way that the right people are seeing the right communication, right? And so it does require some discipline and experimentation, right? So this is something that we say a lot to the team, which is we're going to make mistakes and change is good. We're just not going to let these mistakes define us. They're just going to guide us, right? So having worked in both remote and non-remote, I don't think many of these things are kind of specific to remote. It's just, if anything, it's dangerous to start thinking in terms of solutions that are non-remote and try to apply them to remote, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. I feel like there's so much more we could go into, but being we're limited on time, if you are interested in hearing some more about this, we'll get a link in our show notes to the Hotjar blog where you guys do talk a little bit about this and some of your behind the scenes articles. David, let's tackle a couple quick rapid fire questions and then we'll wrap up. Okay.
Sure thing.
All right. So David, did you experience a time when you thought Hotjar would fail?
Yes.
So what happened and what did you do about it?
Well, it was actually around when we had problems scaling up our infrastructure and architecture. And at the same time, we were starting to see that we had some retention problems, retaining our customers. We've since got to the bottom of both. But yeah, that journey of going from that 20 people to 70 people and from 2,000 customers to 20,000 customers, the requirements on the team and on the organization and the leadership team, they change so many times that it is quite an intense experience. And since then, I think we've grown a lot. And now we're doubling down on making sure we are building the right architecture, we've got the right leadership in place. And yeah, as I said before, we're organizing the team in a way that is the most conducive towards high performance.
Okay. David, what's the one thing you did that had the biggest impact on your growth?
Definitely the waiting list, the list for the beta. It's funny that a lot of people typically ask us, how did you keep on growing? And you'd be surprised how much that initial thing we did just created this wave behind us. So that was incredibly effective.
Yeah, momentum is so important.
Correct.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad we spent a lot of time talking about that. David, if you could go back in time and start over, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say hire a little bit more ahead of the curve and speak more to the people that are similar to who you want to hire. Speak more to them so you get to know them.
Awesome. All right. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on today. Where can people learn more about Hotjar and connect with you?
So we've got the blog. We answer all the comments in there. You can hit me up on Twitter and LinkedIn. So yeah, that's probably the best way to find me.
Perfect. We'll get that linked up. David, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Awesome questions.
Thanks again for listening to our show this week. If you want to find out more or hear previous episodes, you can go to blog.leadquizzes.com. If you'd like to start generating more leads for your business and get a 14-day free trial to Lead Quizzes, go to leadquizzes.com/podcast. Please also subscribe to our show on Apple or however you get your podcasts. You can also write us at support@leadquizzes.com. I'm Jeremy Ellens, and you've been listening to Journey to 7 Figures.